So I'm just going to go quickly through a couple of things to finish off this view, like putting a topo surface in, and then I want to get into setting up the other views really quickly before getting on to more advanced things. So the building there, you can see, doesn't have a ground surface, so if you haven't done a topo surface for a while, I just want to go over the basics of using those. It's fairly straightforward. Never used a topo surface? Okay, so that's all right. I'll cover all the main things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So you've got all the tools for site and topography on the massing and site tab. And then topo surface, it's actually a pretty easy one to use. Once you click on topo surface, you go into sketch mode, and it'll have this option, place point selected. If you click on something else, you just need to select that again to start creating your surfaces. And I've inserted a drawing in here which can give me some idea of the streets, but I don't actually have the more detailed drawing, I don't think, which is fine, I don't need it. So I've just got some of the street elements at least shown there. So, like I was saying, place point is the main tool you use to create the surface. And for a project like this, it's an interiors project after all, so you don't need to do a detailed model of your site. And so, therefore, I'm going to leave the elevation there at 0. And I'm just going to click 4 points around the building. 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice I'm in one of the site plans. If you're in a normal ground floor plan, you won't see those points always. It is coming up in some of them, but you can see in others it's not. So the best option there is to use a site plan, and where you'll always see the points. But again, if you haven't done topo surfaces before, to give you a basic idea or better idea how this place point tool works, when you change the elevation there, it's in millimetres. So I'll make it a metre or 1,000, and I'll click some more points, and those points would then be sloping up. So I'll do another height there, we'll make it 4,000. And I'll just do some more points. And you can see then it's going to generate contour lines. So it's really like joining the dots. You can't trace things, so if I had wanted to create a curved edge, you need to do that in a different way. If I click a point over here, it's just going to connect all of those outer points. So think of it like a shrink wrap that goes over all of the ground, and don't try and model around things. If you need to break up your surface for roads and things like that, do that afterwards, and there are tools for that. So now if I go back to place point, I might just set the elevation there to 0 again, and I'll do some more points in line with these others that I've also got at 0 on either side. So notice then it's brought all of this to 0, and I can see that from the contours here. And if I wanted to slope down below here, I'll make the elevation minus 2,000 or something. And you can see then that it's sloping down, but again I'm starting to get some unusual contours because my 0 points are inside the boundary. So I'll go back to 0 and do some points at that same height just to keep it all at a consistent height all the way across. So I'll show you that now in section. And because this isn't showing much of the site, I can just see a flat surface there. So I might go to an elevation there. The east or the west elevation should show me the slope pretty clearly. So we can see there these points that are higher. You can select them as well in a 3D view, but it's a little bit risky if you're not sure where your elevation view is coming from. So there my elevation is probably coming from about here, so it's cutting through that ground line, which is actually what I want. But I also want to move these points and make them a bit higher. So I'll finish that. And I'm going to quickly just make a new elevation view, which might be a new thing for some of you as well. On the view tab you've got elevation, and so there it's a bit hard to control the direction, it does it automatically. So it tries to point towards the walls that you've created. So I'm just going to place it off to the side here because I know it's going to point to the left. And now I've got a new elevation view called Elevation 1A, where I can see the site from the side, or see the topo surface from the outside. I'll bring that crop region out a bit. And so then going back into my site plan, I'll just adjust that elevation view by selecting the arrowhead. You can see it was only showing a couple of those buildings or parts of the building because it's not going deep enough. So I'll stretch that so that it goes all the way across. Go to the view, and now I can see everything again. And here I just want to select that topo surface, edit surface, and we can also select the points there and using the arrow keys lift them up. So you've got lots of ways of adjusting those points. And again, for a project like this, don't make it too complicated. It's an interiors project, and you're really doing that topo surface more than anything to get your nice ground line at the bottom of your views. So here, it's not giving me a ground line though. Well, it does in places, but mostly it's just a thin line. And that's because, again, this elevation is to one side of the building, to one side of the topo surface. Because I put the elevations where I want to show the parts that you're working on, so blocks B and C, and that's where it should be. I open that elevation. Because it's cutting through the topo surface, then I'll get a nice heavy ground line at the bottom. So, elevation views don't always need to be cropped, but because you're just doing part of the building, you'll definitely want to crop it. So make sure you know about the cropping tools that you have available for any view in Revit. Down the bottom you've got the option to show and hide your crop region, and then the option next to that turns cropping on and off down on the view control bar. So I'll bring the crop region in, just in case you haven't done much of this. And so there we don't need to show any of that part of block D. Bring this across as well. And then just to maybe illustrate that that second option there that turns the cropping on and off, that's a lot clearer now. You can see when you turn cropping on and off, it doesn't remove the crop region. And that's a really useful option. Sometimes you just want to disable it temporarily so you can access things that are outside the crop region. Then turn it back on to crop the view again. And then you've got the option to hide the crop region, which again is really useful because you don't want to see that crop region usually once you're done with it. I'll hide the section view. It's good just to keep tidying your views up as you work in them. And so even though you don't have to do elevations for this project, I just wanted to show you how to get the ground line to show properly in an elevation view. So I'll just bring that crop region over a little bit. So in your section, that's how you'd want the crop region, so the ground surface to show. Maybe with the cropping not quite so low, so coming up. Okay, but you'd want the ground hatch to show below your ground line to indicate that it's a section view. But how do you show it in an elevation view? Do you show the ground hatch in an elevation view? Anyone? No, definitely not. That's right. It is sort of cutting it, but you don't want to indicate that it's been cut. So yeah, you definitely don't want to show it. And so you can use that same trick I was just showing you a little while ago. Select it, right-click, and then go to Override Graphics in View. And so, like I was saying, I encourage you to experiment with the views, so with the options you have here to override graphics. I'm just going to show you a couple now, or one in particular. So choosing by element there. Now I'm going to go to cut pattern and just disable it. Okay, and there, that's got me to the ground hatch. So that's basically an elevation view, even though it is cutting through part of the building. There's not much we can do to avoid that, because otherwise you'd have to show the other building, which would hide the things you're trying to show. So the section, on the other hand, so I'll use section 2, that's the one I want. I've already tidied that up, so I'm not going to go right into it now, but if you remember earlier I was just showing you, you can use things like filled regions if you've totally forgotten how to cover up things like the roof there, and then also detail lines to draw in anything that's missing from your drawing that you don't want to model in 3D. And of course, don't forget about hiding things when they don't look right, and again, that's really helpful. That ceiling needs to be a bit higher. And so then the section views and the plan views, like this one, all that's required for the first project where you're showing the existing building. So floor plans of each level, so both levels, the 2 levels, just one section. Basic labelling, so I'll maybe touch on that in a minute. Scale, and all of those views should be at a scale. I'm sure you all know by now, you set the scale in the view control bar, you've got the option there to choose a scale. So, looking at a sheet, you've got the built-in sheets that you'll have in any project that you start in Revit that have the horrible Autodesk logo. Well, it's not horrible, but you don't want to see that. So I'm going to delete that sheet, and I'm going to go and make a new sheet and use load to get a sheet from the library we have on the P drive. So does anyone not know how to get there? No? So I won't show you how to get there. It's the one on the P drive. If you haven't got a shortcut, just browse to it manually. And there in the title blocks folder, if you haven't looked there, you've got really useful title blocks that I've made for you, like these blank pages. If you don't want a title block at all, they're really useful just to give you an idea of the paper size and how big your view is going to be on that particular page size. And that can be helpful if you then want to do the final setup of your pages in InDesign or Photoshop or Illustrator, because then you can establish the size of your views at different scales relative to a page size. So that's a useful option. But I'm going to use one that has a title block, because you need to have that for this project, and it's fine for this project just to do them with Revit. So I didn't nominate a page size there. You can use any page size you like, and I didn't even nominate a scale. So you could do A3 if you really want to, but I'd probably go for a bigger page size. It'll give you more room to work with. And so A2 I think would be a good page size. So I've got A2 landscape below there. And so if you haven't used title blocks very much in Revit, it's really down to the person who's made the title block, and you need to then experiment and see which fields are adjustable, or which field the person who made it has made adjustable. So here I can adjust this drawn by field. Just put my initials, checked by, well that'll be me as well, and the date. This one isn't an automatic date, so you'd have to type it in, but it's come up with today's date anyway, so that's okay. And the page number is another adjustable one, so that's one that we can just type in. But I know this title block, the drawing title as well is adjustable, so I might call this floor plans. but things like the also project name is also adjustable. So DCE, sorry, let's just put DCE block B and C. But then things like the project address and the contact number aren't adjustable with this particular title block. So anyone know what you'd need to do to adjust those things? Exactly. Yep. So that's always the go-to option. If you don't have the option of adjusting it in the project, think about using that option there, edit family. And then you can adjust any of those other fields. So the address here, road in-law, and so on. You can adjust all of those. And it's a really easy thing then to modify that and turn it into your own title block. So then if you make changes to this title block family, you'll need to save that as a new family. You don't have to give it a different name, you just need to save it into a different folder. So I'm going to actually, it's a good trick to leave the same name so that when you load it back into your project, this one, it's going to just give you the option to overwrite the existing version. And there we go, it's changed my title block, and I can go and do the same to change all those other properties. And now I want to start putting the views onto these sheets. So I'm going to drag it across my floor plan. Oh, there's nothing. No. So then you can see, as I was saying, how big this view is on that page size. And that's a really useful thing to have, obviously, when you're setting up your pages like we are now for this to finish the first project, but also when you start working on your design. I'd actually do this before you've done very much design work at all, because then you have a good idea how the views can be set out as you're doing your design, which is going to give you a good idea how much you need to draw. And you'll see when we go and do the perspectives, that's extremely useful. So I've deleted that view because it was too big. You can resize it on the page, but a really good tip I can give you there is to do as much as you can in the view before you put it on the page. So there, I've changed it to 1 to 200. Notice that the section lines disappeared. Anyone got any idea why that's happening when I change the scale? Something you might have noticed if you've gone to 1 to 200 ever. So it's one of those kind of not very well known options actually with sections. They have an option in the section itself. So if you select a section, you'll see it's got the option to hide its scales coarser than. So there it's going to hide its scales coarser than the 1 to 100. Now I want to see it at 1 to 200, so I'm going to change that to hide its scales coarser than 1 to 200. Now if I change the scale to 1 to 200, it won't hide that section. It's hidden the other one, and that's good because I don't want the other one. So then in the page, or the sheet, I can now drag that on and it will easily fit. And notice it's resized the label to suit. Whereas if I'd done it the other way, if I changed the scale on the page, the view changes size. So I'm just looking at A2. Yeah. And so notice it changes the scale of the drawing or the view, but the tag would need to be resized manually. So that's just a simple thing you can do to get your tags automatically the right size. So what was that? Oh yes, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll show you that. So if you select the title block on the sheet, and then go to Edit Type, and then you can go to Load, and load a different title block that way. So you can load in a new page size, and it's best to have the page sizes already set up in families. So yeah, so that's the best way to change it because it gets the print size from the title block size. Yep. Yeah. So then you'd have to select it and then use that same option, go to edit type, and then you'll have it in the list here of families, title block families to choose from. So because I've got this AO page, I can just switch to that straight away. Right, I can try, but they've changed. What's happened? They've changed the proxy, the way that we access the internet in here. It goes via a server, and it's causing all sorts of problems with things other than just standard browsing. So I'll have a look at it later and see if there's a way. Because I've made it work because I use Dropbox too, but I know it's a bit fiddly. Okay, so you should be able to fit both floor plans on there. So I'll make a new sheet. Okay, so I just wanted to remind you there with the section view, how you get the referencing. So I might just delete that just to illustrate what's happened there. So if you've seen in your section labels that it just has these dashes and you've wanted to change those to a set of numbers to reference the views, notice when you put the view that it's referencing onto a sheet, so this is section 2, then if I go back to look at the floor plan now, it's automatically got the referencing there. Okay, so that's something that can trip you up, but if you know about referencing, it's much easier than doing it manually, and Revit will automatically update the references. So if this changes to view number 2 on the page, automatically back on the floor plan, that's going to update. Yeah, exactly, and then you can just change that number there. So I'll change it back to 1, and then that's changed. Okay, so just a couple of other things maybe with viewports. When you select a viewport, you can easily move them around, and it moves the tag with it. It is, yeah. Well, it's just getting used to selecting them separately, yeah, because...
Yeah, you have to like the whole thing move the label.
That's right. So, well, that's right. To move the whole viewport or to change the size of that tag, you select the viewport. But then to just move the label, you've got to deselect everything and then click on just the label, and you can move it separately. So make sure you're aware of that, and works pretty well. Sorry? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, the best option is to set the viewport to no title in properties, and we'll just turn that off altogether. Okay. So that's a bit tricky. What you'd have to do is make your own title tag. That's a family, and you can do that. They're in the annotation folder. You'll see you can easily make your own, but it's a bit technical. And so probably an easier option is just to set it to no title, and then just draw on with text on Annotate tab. You can use the text tool and just draw in the text you want. So we want that to be bigger text, obviously. And sorry, let's do that again. So that's sometimes quicker and easier than trying to make a new tag. Such a fiddly thing though. Yeah. Because, like I said, you can definitely make your own tags, but it's a bit more technical than making other families. But I'll delete that and go back to having it. So the main thing I really wanted to point out there is the way you're getting that size. And just remind you, it's using the scale to give you the size of the orthographic or the orthogonal views. So plans, sections, elevations, and also, even though you don't need to do them for this project, axonometric views. So you definitely by this stage would have done a lot of axonometric views, I'd be assuming. So 3D views that aren't in perspective.
Yeah, we've got to do them.
Yeah, you would have drawn them even by hand, I'm sure. Yeah, they're actually the way I design by hand. I do all my hand drawing in Axo. That's just the way I was taught to draw, so I'm just used to doing it that way. It's much easier than drawing perspectives to do design work, I find. If you don't want to do a plan, if your plan isn't going to give you enough, they're pretty good. And the great thing about Revit is that it does axonometrics automatically. Everything's an axonometric if it's not a perspective. So it's always got a vertical axis. And so the main idea there is that the axis in Revit is always vertical, which means it's an axonometric view, not an isometric view. But you'll see, even in the next assignment brief, I've called them isometric views because that's the term you're probably more familiar with. And do you know what an isometric view is? Because you need to do it for the next project.
Oh, I always get these.
Yeah, everyone does. But it's easy if you remember what the original words mean. So iso in, I think, ancient Greek, I think means equal. And so in isosceles triangle, you have two equal angles. And you'll see that term come up like ortho. Ortho basically means at right angles. And so that's a true isometric view there when you click on the corners of your cube. Because you have equal angles between the top, front and right sides there. So that's a nice thing again that Revit does for you. If you want the other one where it's got 30 and it's got 45s as opposed to 30-60. This is, do you use those angles 30-60 to do your ISOs? No? Oh, you don't do much hand drawing probably for this. Yeah, so well, they're making the first use do it now. It's coming back. A lot of it's really coming back. So it's worth looking at this stuff. Collage, watercolor, all that old stuff is really making a big comeback. And you're expected to do that as well as the computing stuff nowadays. But I know you are lucky you just are allowed to do computing stuff for...
Well,
yeah, I know, that's right. Exactly. And it's the same, I mean, the uni I'm going to, they manual drawing people, so they're making us do everything by hand, even people who can use computers. So.
if you have Brian, most likely using
That's right, exactly. And I know he's going to be doing a lot of the design subjects from now on, so it's good to look at that. And it's an easy thing to do if you get the set squares that you can buy. They always have 30 and 60 because they're the angles you use to draw isometrics. So think about how you can use Revit to help you with those, even if you're doing hand drawing. But if you want to do different angles, I'll show you how to do those later, because that's a difficult thing in Revit. But the main thing I really wanted to show you there is that you also set the size of those views using a scale. So going down to my sheet now, I can place the view that I just had open, which was section box 2, onto the sheet, and I know how big it's going to be because I've set that scale 1 to 200 in advance. And it will just make it there with the section. And then maybe just a little thing I can show you before I go into perspective views is that you can work on the sheet. And do most of you still use AutoCAD?
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, AutoCAD's still a great tool. I use it almost every day along with Revit. So don't forget to use AutoCAD. And for getting work, it's still probably the main program they want you to use. But Revit's a great skill as well. They're really looking for Revit people because a lot of offices are switching over and struggling to make the switch. So what I wanted to show you there is you can, if you're wondering about the option of drawing in paper space in AutoCAD and whether you can do that in Revit, you can. Select a viewport, right click and activate view, or use the option up there on the ribbon, same thing, activate view, and then it's just like switching from paper space to model space on a layout in AutoCAD. So there I can adjust that crop region and no. So that's a really useful option as well to when you want to work on a page, and obviously here it's helpful to position that in relation to the other things I have on the page. And now again I can right click and deactivate view. I'll save it. And I'm back to the page, and it's now like I'm working in paper space, and I can bring that tag over and do those other things. So I've got a couple of views there that are at scale, but now maybe I want to have some views that are in perspective. And so the main difference there is that, well, I'll ask you, the size is set differently. So can you set a scale for perspective views? Yeah, well, you can set a size, but can you set a scale in the same way as a floor plan? No, you can't set a uniform scale, and that's the basic principle. So sometimes actually there's a bit of an error that pops up in Revit, and it'll let you click on this perspective label and choose a scale, but it doesn't do anything except change the line weights. Because you can't have a uniform scale. Things in the foreground in a perspective view are always bigger than things in the background. It's obviously the same window here, but it's bigger here than it is in the background because it's perspective. So, how do you set the size for a perspective view? Yeah, when you're on the sheet.
Oh, sorry.
But in here.
I just like select it and then
The crop, that's right. Yeah, the crop region. So you click on the crop border there, and then you get size crop. Click there, and then you have this option to set a width and a height. Now, if I change the height, I'll change the height to, let's say, 100. And notice the width doesn't change. So you can set those two independently, but notice it's changing the view, so it changes what I can see inside that crop region. And so really what that's doing is changing the field of view, if you know anything about photography. And it has that option selected, field of view. So if you change the width or the height, with field of view, it's going to change what you see in your perspective view. If you just want to change the size of the view, use scale lock proportions instead. And that's usually the option you'd want here. So I'm going to cancel this and go to my sheet, and I'll put that view on. So it was 3D view 1. So I'll drag that onto the sheet, and now I want to make it bigger without changing what's showing inside that crop region. So notice when you select it on the sheet, you get the same option there, size crop. And then straight to scale lock proportions, and this time if I change the height, I'm going to make it bigger this time. I'll make it 150. I'm going to click across to the width, and notice it automatically is going to change that. So it's got the proportions locked. In other words, if you change one, the other's going to change in proportion. Click OK, and it's just changing the size of the view on the sheet effectively. Now again here, I could select that tag and move it and stretch it, But remember that little trick I showed you? You can just delete it from the sheet, drag it on again, and it redoes that for you automatically. Oops. Okay, so exactly the same principles apply with rendering. And it really does tie into rendering on a deeper level as well. So I've just opened that view up again so I can show you the render dialog box. And I think I've shown you this before, but I just wanted to remind you, if you've wondered how it gets this size here in pixels, and this is the reason I was talking about the presentation subjects before, because with Jane you would have done resolutions for different for different sheet sizes and your print resolution. So do you know what print resolution is, or should be? Exactly, yes. 300 these days is standard. You don't want to do anything less than 300 nowadays. So with screen selected, you don't have any control really over these numbers. And you've got a bit of control, but not much exact control, because, like it says, it's the screen resolution. So if I zoom now, notice these numbers change. It's using the numbers or the pixels I can see on my monitor to give us that width and height. So as I zoom in and out, I have more pixels inside that border, or as I zoom in. Instead, if you go to printer, then notice it uses the width and the height that you set with size crop. So that's a really useful option also for rendering, because it determines your final resolution. And so like I was mentioning before, if you start thinking about this as you're doing your designs, renders for big expansive areas, in advance you can set up on your sheet and get an idea how big that render is going to be, and then work out how many pixels you're going to need to render that finally when you do your final renders. Renders of more detailed parts of your design that maybe don't need to be so big, you can set up in advance to have a small width and height, and then you'll need less pixels. And you can also start to think about the level of detail you're going to show for the elements you design and how many pixels you're going to need to show those things. Exactly. And so if I do that now, it's going up to a big pixel count. Anything over 2000, it's going to take a while to render. But if I go back to 1 to 50, for test renders, that's fine. And I can still set that up on the sheet and get a good idea how it's going to look. So going back to 75 even. And that's really a small pixel count now, but that's good because it'll render quickly. So I'll just render that on draft, and it's going to take next to no time. I'll save that one and I'll come back and I'll redo the sun. So just to finish off the setting up on the sheets, if I use Save to Project, it saves it in Revit. And for this project, that is as far as you need to go to get these rendered views. So I'm not expecting any post-production or any work in Photoshop for these renders. But when you do your design, you'll need to do some post-production. In other words, you'll need to adjust the renders and add things like entourage, people, and probably even finishes and furniture. Lots of things will need to be added afterwards using Photoshop. And so to do that, you need to export the view and have a good idea about the different file formats. So which file formats are you using to save your views or to work with in Photoshop? Yeah, TIFFs are the best. Still, they have been forever and they still are. So TIFFs give you the most options. They're one of the most advanced file formats going around. They're constantly updating the format and it's a great format to use. The only drawback is that it's big. They're big files. And then also they can be a little bit technical if you're not across all the different graphic options. Yes.
And you can put TIFF into Photoshop and you can have layers of files.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So they're a really excellent format to use. But again, they do get a bit technical. And so another option is to use JPEGs for your tests, especially. They're small files and they're less technical. So things like the backgrounds don't get saved as an alpha channel, and so you'll have less issues there. And then another option as well is PNG, which is really the new JPEG format. And they do give you some of the options that TIFFs give you as well. So alpha channels and things like that can be used with PNGs, but not so much with JPEGs. And I actually find alpha channels easier in PNGs than TIFFs. TIFFs definitely can do alpha channels, but you get so many options, they can be a bit hard to get to. So PNG is a good one to know about as well. But for test renders, I think JPEGs are fine. So always, when you want to keep a render that you're happy with, export it so you can access it outside of Revit. But for quick things that you just do within Revit, save to project is good enough. And so if I go down now into the project browser, you'll see I've got a rendering section where it's placing these renderings that I've done. So these are some others that I did earlier that took a bit longer with that same space. And I'll put those onto a sheet. So if I go and place one of those onto a sheet now, the size is set in a similar way to the perspective view above. You set it in millimetres, but you access it in a different way. Unfortunately, being Revit, of course, they like to make things different. So I'll actually just make this one a bit smaller. So to change the size of this view, you need to activate the view, and then you can select the image, and then you'll get the width and height down below. So the width there, if I make that 160, notice it's got the option to lock proportions there, so it will change the height in proportion or automatically, and now it's the same width as the one above. Okay, so the only way is to activate the view, in other words. And they also, unfortunately, there's an error with this tag. It puts the scale in. And so the only way really of taking that off is to change the tag. Yeah, it's not a simple thing. I'm going to show you that later. So what I do for now is just set it to no title and then manually draw some text on. Make the, oh yeah, so that's it. Just remember, activate the view and then select it again, and you'll get the width and the height and properties on the left, or wherever you've got properties. So the very final thing is just to give you a quick refresher on setting your sun. So I'll quickly just show you the plan and get you thinking about the sun a bit. Which way's north in this building, in relation to the building? Yep. That way? Yeah, that way. Yeah, that's, yeah, so it's slightly this way actually. Yeah, you're right, it is slightly that way, but close enough to perpendicular to where we are. So we're lucky, we don't really need to change north. For an interiors project, you'd get away with it being at this angle. But I want to show you how to adjust it anyway, just in case you want to do it more accurately. So if you want to, you can go and get a Google Earth or Street View or just a Google Maps snapshot and work out, if you bring in a satellite image, work out exactly where true north is. I know though where it is, so I'm just going to do it manually. So I'm going to draw a reference plane to mark where I think north is, which is, as I said, pretty close to being vertical but slightly to the left of that. So it's about there, I think. And I'll show you later though, when you're doing your proposal, maybe how to get a satellite image in. But if you want to have a look at the videos I've done for the Entry Charlton Pool, it's got it all in there as well. And it's a good thing to know about, getting accurate sun lighting is one of the main reasons for using a computer to do your drawings rather than doing it by hand, where people just, honestly, they just make it up quite often when they're doing hand drawing. So if you can get an accurate sun, it's a good thing. So this is the direction I want north to be, following that reference plane. And then going to the manage, the manage tab, and then in project location, at the bottom you have the option there to choose rotate true north. And of course I'm not in a true north view. That's the first thing. So I've opened up the wrong site plan. I need to open up my true north view, and if you've ever wondered what that's for, it's there so you can set true north. So using the same option there, rotate true north, and I'm just going to drag that base point onto my reference plane, and then snap my angle line onto that reference plane to begin with, and then bring it around so that my new angle is vertical. So at 90 degrees, in other words. So that reference plane should be now perfectly vertical. The building's rotated. But if I go and look in any of the other views that are not true north views, they'll all be at their original orientation. And that's how you want it to be. You don't want to have the whole building always oriented to true north, because it takes up more room on the sheet apart from anything else, and also means everything is, of course, at an angle. So then, if I go and open up a perspective that I want to render, to use that new sun direction, you need to go to sun settings on the view control bar, go to still. So with lighting, it uses an angle that you type in, and if you sit down and work it out, you can type in the sun's angle, but no one wants to do that. So instead, if you choose still, it'll use your location and the date and time to set the sun in combination with the true north direction that you've set. Now, I can't really tell yet, well, I can get some indication actually if I click apply what the sun's doing there, but to get a better indication, I'm going to click OK, turn shadows on, and now I can see really clearly what the sun's doing. Back to sun settings, and if you're still not totally au fait with the way the sun changes throughout the year, this is a really good way of working it all out. So if I go to December, and that's not December, sorry. Well, it's close enough anyway. So December is roughly, or the end of December is roughly the summer solstice. And so in summer, the sun is very high in the sky, generally. It rises early in the day. By midday, it's almost directly overhead, so you'll get some sun coming through the windows, but not a whole lot, because it's very high in the sky. And it sets late in the day, and by that time we won't get any sun coming through these windows. So summer, even though you might think it's going to give you lots of sun, actually usually gives you the worst sun lighting for your renders. Spring, so at the equinox, which is around the 22nd, we'll get the sun at more of an angle. And again, the sun rises a little bit later in the day, and sometimes that can actually give you some pretty decent angles for your sun, because, and also the colour is important. It gives you more reddish tones at sunrise and sunset, and then more blue and cyan tones in the middle of the day. Winter, so the 22nd June, which is the winter solstice, you'll get really steep angles, so we're getting it coming through there, not quite horizontal, but pretty close to it. So you're going to get lots of sun, and so that way, once you get used to that, you can use the date to control the angle of your sun, and you can position it really accurately just by fine-tuning that. And with these buildings, both of them, you should be able to get a lot of natural light through those windows. So going back to render now, I might set a little bit high quality. Okay, so if you remember, I've been encouraging you to set up lights in your existing building models, but notice I haven't put a requirement for there to be natural, so artificial lighting for this first project. You can do it all just with natural lighting. So there we are, I've got a render with natural lighting that's good enough. I'd probably try and do it on high quality, but otherwise good enough. And using exposure there, I can make that brighter so that it's bright enough to see that space. Again, save the project. So that's my new view saved, and I can go and place that on a sheet just like any of the others. So that's it. That's hopefully going to cover all those view types you need for this first project, and also give you a good setup to start looking at for your design project, because you can reuse a lot of those views as you start putting your design in, and you know, it should give you clean graphics and again a good setup for the existing elements, so that when you put your design, the elements that you're designing in for your proposal, they should start to look different to the existing things. So you want simplified graphics, black for your cut elements for existing, but then make sure you put hatches and colours in for your new elements that you're designing. So let me know if there's anything else you're not sure about with your view setup, but hopefully it should be pretty basic setup for the views. Don't try and make it too complicated. So I'll maybe finish the recording there, and